Right. And we are live. Awesome. Welcome everyone. Hope you've had an amazing weekend and a restful weekend. It's Sunday night here for me. So we're going to get started. Tonight's topic is you can be right or you can be happy. You usually cannot be both. And we're going to talk about different tips and strategies you can use to avoid arguments. And so I'm going to start off by telling a bit of a story. So, one of the things that has always been really funny for me is that I've often gotten in trouble for being right. And arguments usually happen. And so I'm going to provide a couple of work examples today. And so one of the things that had happened, I had talked about before, if this is your first time, so I was on a change management project, and we were going through all of these challenges between the companies that we had brought on, and they weren't able to achieve the company's objectives. And so they brought in these change management experts. And so we put together a project. We broke down the barriers and what the challenges were. And during that time, I had been promoted twice. And before, I had been like a customer service um, order prep load planner kind of thing for being able to put freight together. And then when I got promoted, I ended up getting promoted to a position where I was more of a systems analyst, and there were certain criteria. So we had product that was light, heavy product on the bottom, and then lighter, more volume kind of product on the top. And so there were certain thresholds that we had to meet. We had to maximize the trailer, we had to cube it out to full capacity. So they set a benchmark of criteria that had to be met, and we had to build the loads to those sizes. And I was actually pretty resourceful at how I was able to get that. So I didn't just rely on the system. So I would run the orders through the system, and it would produce a load plan for what the warehouse had to pick and how they had to load those orders. And I know you're probably thinking, Tina, why are you talking about transport and logistics when I thought this is more trauma and happiness related? I'm going to get to it. Stick with me, okay? So, what ended up happening is they set the threshold and I executed on it. I executed to the T, and I actually would even go above and beyond what the system planned for the orders. And sometimes I would see that maybe the system hadn't planned to full capacity. And so what I would do is I'd search the system of any future orders going to the same location, same customer, and then I would contact our client and I would say, hey, can we pull these orders in so that we can maximize the cube? And we started streamlining how the orders were dropping into the system. And so because I kind of went above that, I was building the loads to capacity. So here's where I got in trouble for being right. So in building the loads to the capacity, we ended up, although I executed and I delivered on the objective that they were looking for and I maximized the loads. What was happening is, although it looked good on paper and it seemed like it was a good idea, we started having problems in the warehouse. And the warehouse would call and complain and be like, Tina, what the fuck, man? We can't even get a slip of paper on these loads. You've got them built so tight. Like, we can't do this. We can't actually execute on this. And our damages went up and all of this other stuff. So I ended up getting in trouble for actually delivering on what I was told to do. And so I was right. I built them to the load size that they required. And I was actually even resourceful. I went above and beyond, and I still got in trouble. So I was right, but I definitely was not happy. So a lot of times we can do things, and we can do things what we think is the right way. We follow the system, we follow the procedures, and it still ends up causing problems. So, what we have to do is we have to understand that we need to be able to be flexible, we need to be able to be adaptable, we need to be able to be resourceful and solve whatever problems come up from doing things that we thought were correct. Because I can promise you, it doesn't matter whether you do it right or whether you do it wrong, there will always be more problems. And if you are adverse to being able to solve problems, then that is going to be your limitation. That is going to be where you're going to be really unhappy because you still see problems coming up. And it's like, no, it shouldn't be a matter of whether or not there's problems. There will always be problems. It's a matter of, are these the same problems or are they new problems? And what can we do, or what did we miss that ended up causing those problems? And we start to look at that kind of stuff, we start to have a better chance at solving those problems and being able to work together. So happiness isn't whether or not you actually achieve the results, whether or not you actually hit the target. Because I hit the targets and I execute on them and I'm relentless at being able to get that. However, that still caused a lot of problems and I've done that multiple times over. So I haven't quite learned this lesson because my problem is I take people at face value. So when they say that this should be done, I assume that they've done the same due diligence that I would have done at being able to understand whether or not that's possible and whether what the possible fallouts would be should we be able to achieve that. And unfortunately, that's not always the case. And I think a lot of us end up falling into this challenge where we think that other people think the same way we do, and that is where the real conflict comes in. And being able to see something from somebody else's perspective is what the biggest challenge is. And our ability to be able to see it from somebody else's perspective, especially if we really don't agree with their perspective, is where you can actually learn to be the most successful, the most happy, is being able to understand the other person's perspective. And instead of arguing and fighting and trying to prove that you're right and they're wrong, that is where relationships start to fall apart. This is where you start having negative feelings, bad emotions, and then you start working against each other instead of working collaboratively together to be able to solve whatever challenges you're facing. And those unresolved hurts are what end up causing a lot of the unhappiness that we feel, right? Hey, Colin, good to see you. Hello. I'm doing well. How are you? I hope you had a good weekend. So, in going through this process, one of the keys to communication is we have to understand who we are speaking with and also how they prefer to be spoken with, right? So, there is no point calling somebody on the phone. That might be your preferred communication method, but if somebody else can't stand that and they prefer maybe a text message first or they prefer an email, because of the different things, it's a matter of being able to put ourselves in the other person's shoes, understand what it is that they want, and communicate with them in a way that they're open and receptive to receiving the information. Because you'll save a lot of time at being able to communicate when they're actually open to receiving your message. If you try to do it in a way that is most comfortable and convenient to you, then that will cause conflict, which isn't always a bad thing. It depends on the situation, who you're communicating with, and um, who is desiring the outcome more than the other, right? So it's a matter of figuring out leverage, and that is one of the keys of negotiation, of being able to know what is your bottom line, what is your framework, what is the other person's framework, and can you find a way to collaborate? Yes, you can learn to strong arm somebody, you can learn to get the upper hand, but the most successful negotiations are when people come out feeling like they have both won. If one feels like the other one got the advantage and they got taken advantage because they were in a weaker negotiating point, then that is not a good thing. Even though you may feel like you have won, you will end up losing ultimately, because that person will remember how they felt in that negotiation process. They will remember feeling like they were getting taken advantage of. They will remember feeling like they didn't fully trust you. They will remember feeling all of these things, and that will end up coming to bite you in the ass later. So, although a lot of time, and those things never get measured in a KPI, they never ever get measured. And it's always the ones that were able to get the sale across the line, or close the deal, or whatever it is, by hook or by crook, and whether or not it was done in a proper way, it doesn't matter as long as they close the sale. And I'm like, okay, I understand that to a logical point, to a point. But there are consequences, and there is fallout for not doing this the right way. And it may take years before it bites you. And I've seen this happen so many times in business, in relationships. You may let things go, and it's like, oh, it's not worth the fight. I'm just going to let them have their way, because if not, they're going to be a pain in my butt. And that will bite you in the butt later, right? So, understanding how to communicate with people so that you can try to strive for a win-win outcome. If you are doing it in a way that is making the other person feel like they're getting the short end of the stick, that is never a good negotiation. Even if you win the deal, that is not a good negotiation. And unfortunately, that's a hard KPI to measure. Why? Because communication. People do not always speak their truth. They often hide things. They will often say yes when they really meant no. They will do all these different kinds of things because we are taught, we are conditioned, or from previous trauma, to learn to hide our pain. We hide how we actually feel about something. And then that doesn't get communicated properly, which does not give the other person a chance to be able to show that they are trustworthy, show that they are willing to actually fix and correct the issue. And being able to have that kind of open, honest communication requires you to be able to do quite a bit of inner work so that you recognize your own feelings, that you're in full command and control over your own emotions. And when you do that, you can create a safe space for the other person to actually open up, feel like they can trust you. And because you know that you can actually trust yourself with your emotions, you're aware of these things, and you are able to recognize when other people are feeling uncomfortable because you've done that inner work, and you're able to actually call it out, and you can see it, and you can call it out in a way that doesn't make them feel threatened either. Now, sometimes it does, like, you got to shake some people up a little bit, and you kind of got to give them a little bit, but you are able to deliver this in small doses so that they don't become too threatened. You need to be able to adjust and manage and pivot and um, know, okay, have I gone too far to the left? Have I gone too far to the right? And being able to understand that and be able to navigate and use this in a way that you're communicating that they truly understand, that they are coming to a conclusion themselves that this is something that they actually do want. They are actively participating, collaborating, and looking for a win-win solution, because those are the kind of people, those are the customers that you want to partner with. Those are not the customers that are going to stab you in the back later, request refunds, cause problems, just be a drain on the system, all of those kind of things. You want to make sure that you are actually communicating effectively. And when you and the people that you have in your organization are able to understand and be aware of how to communicate, and also be aware of people's resistance and why they may resist communication. And oftentimes, this is from previous traumas. People are naturally wanting to be open and trusting and believing of people. It takes a lot more energy to be in a place of fear, to be in a place of mistrust, uncertainty. That takes a lot more energy. You have to constantly be on guard, scanning for dangers, what's the problem, all of those kind of things. And so being able to um, know how to communicate in a way that doesn't trigger those alarm bells for other people is really important. And that you are doing this not just because you're trying to get your way or that you want to prove that you're right. In fact, the strongest people typically are open to assuming that they are not necessarily right. They have an idea, but they are actually really open to, hey, if you can provide me additional data or some other information that will show me that I am not correct, I will drop what I was doing and I will adopt your way. That's how you know you have somebody that is a true leader that is actually really humble, really open to solutions and suggestions because they're not so stuck on having to have their way. Because if you're in that energy where it has to be my way or the friggin' highway, then I can promise you you're operating in a state of fear that you have got such a chokehold on things, such a tight grip that you cannot let go. I know I've been in those situations too where I had to have complete command and control over everything. I was in there. I've done things like micromanaging and hovering over my team and knowing that that's usually because I'm in a state of fear. I don't have the confidence. I'm not assured that they can actually perform without me, or I know that I haven't been able to fully communicate everything that I needed to communicate to. Because oftentimes we're downloading and we're trying to dump decades worth of information or understanding and knowledge, because I've trained so many people over the years. And oftentimes it's not so much just giving them the right information. Oftentimes they have to unlearn incorrect stuff that they've learned from either previous jobs, previous relationships, how other people have interacted with them. If they grew up in an abusive home and you raise your voice, or you're too open, or you're too closed, any of those things can cause triggers. And being aware of different reactions from people and how to navigate those um, is is a great way to become more happy. They're going to be happier. You're going to be happier because now you're on the same page. You're on the same vibe. You're on the same wavelength, right? You're in a flow state where you're actually working together, you're collaborating, and everything becomes so much easier when both parties feel understood and they feel acknowledged. And where it gets really interesting is when you have some team dynamics or team negotiations, and being able to modify and adjust in real time is always a fun experience, because you're going to have somebody that is more focused on, say, the bottom line and how quickly can we get this done, and I don't want to mess around, and this better go right the first time, those kind of people. And then you have more the, uh, I've had like 4 or 5 different people in the room at the same time, and very, very different personalities. And that has been something that is actually strategic in the way that some companies will stack their team meetings. They have, and then they have the quiet one. It's always the quiet one that you have to watch out for, right? Because the quiet one is just sitting back and observing and paying attention, and then they will go and feed back later what they were able to do. I've been in that role before. I've also been in the role where I'm the bubbly one, the energetic one, the, your best friend, buying you coffee, all that kind of stuff, right? and just being very social. So I can pivot in a lot of the different roles. I've also been in the role where I've got the friggin' spreadsheet, I've got all the data, I'm ready to question every single thing that you've got on the go here. What about this line in the contract? What about that line in the contract? We're not happy with this. We need this change, that change, da 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 da. So I've been all of these different personalities, if you will, in a negotiation. And I've also had to negotiate with those type of people of being able to understand. And the best way of being able to do that is um, knowing knowing your business really, really well and really understanding it, understanding what kind of challenges that they're going to have, what kind of challenges you actually have within the business, and that you're not actually trying to hide them, that you can be transparent without shooting yourself in the foot, obviously, right? But knowing you must at least have the confidence in the company that even if things go wrong, because people know that there will always be problems. But what they want to know, what they truly want to know, is that even if shit goes sideways, that you've got them, that you'll actually take care of them, that you're not just going to say, well, now that you're in here, screw you. I'm not going to, I've got other things that I'm doing, or I'm too busy for this, or you're being a pain in the butt. You start treating somebody like that once you've taken their money, and I can promise you, they will always remember how that made them feel. Every negotiation you have with them, even if they don't leave, is just going to be that much harder. It's going to be that much more challenging that you're not able to, they don't have complete trust, confidence, and faith in you or the business, right? Or if a problem does happen and it doesn't get resolved, you don't work with them, you don't try to solve those things, they're going to be really unhappy, right? And you can be right about, well, you didn't provide this information to us. You said that you wanted this, but now you've changed your mind and you say you want this. You can be right, but I can promise you neither one of you is going to be happy over that. So it's a matter of how do we work together, and no matter who is dealing with your business, whether they are a supplier, whether they are a customer, whether they're an employee, whether they're a partner, whether they're an investor, it does not matter who you're dealing with. You always have to look at this is a lifelong partnership. And so often what happens is people just focus on get my result and move on. Very transactional. I don't have to deal with it. That's somebody else's problem within the business. And the bigger your business grows, the more susceptible you are to these kind of problems coming up. That each department will only focus on their piece, and you end up having this disconnect, this kind of silo thing that ends up happening. And there's a lack of communication that happens between the divisions. And learning to treat everybody as if they are your best customer. Everybody within the organization as if they are your best customer. You're not going to blow them off. You're not going to dismiss them. You're going to try to work with them. You're going to try and solve their problem. You're going to communicate in a way that you are seeking to understand what is the challenge and how can I help you, rather than no, this is not what we agreed on. This is not right. I'm right, you're wrong. And now you have conflict. Now you're both unhappy, right? So focusing on you can be right or you can be happy is really important. Okay. So now, how do you deal? So that's a lot of the business examples. More of the personal examples is and growing up, I had a lot of things where the more right I was about something, the more I would get in trouble. It was taken as um, an attack every time I tried to argue back or I tried to provide proof or logic. It was seen as disrespect. And it was seen as I was challenging authority, and I really wasn't. I was just trying to find an actual solution. And the problem is I grew up with what some would term as a malignant narcissist. That was my abuser that I grew up with, and um, so oftentimes, even though I would provide logical proof, that was always flipped around, and I was told that no, that wasn't correct. So you start to learn to doubt yourself. You feel anxious at being able to confront things. And this is why I think I developed this whole way of being of that I won't react um, first, because before, in the beginning, of course I would fight and I would argue, and so that's the first state of fear, right, of trying to reset a boundary, going, no, it wasn't me, I didn't do that. And it didn't matter whether I did or didn't. He wasn't looking for whether it was factual, he was looking for control. He was looking for dominance, and the truth was irrelevant. His opinion was all that mattered, and his way was the only acceptable answer. And unless I caved to that, there was no happiness for sure. There was definitely no happiness, and even in doing that, it caused a lot of fear, a lot of doubt. So I would learn to avoid the situation. So I would pull back, and even then, that wasn't enough, because it's like now he would start to chase, and he would, you know, be persistent. Even when I wasn't trying to argue, I no longer was trying to fight about that kind of stuff. So it's like I would avoid it, and he would go out of his way to pick a fight and to get me to argue. And so then oftentimes I would end up freezing, right? So it's the fight, flight, freeze, and then fawn, right? So that's where, when you've run out of so much energy that you've been conditioned in this so long, that you just start to agree with them, and you actually start to fight and advocate for them on their behalf. And I used to do this when my mom and him were fighting. They would be arguing about bills or money and stuff like that. And I wasn't looking for who was right. What I would do is I would remember sitting at the dining room table. And so one is my active abuser that I should have like just went, fuck you, hate you, you suck. And it didn't matter what that was. This was survival, that I had to learn this stuff. And so I would explain to my mom, this is what his perspective is, this is where he's coming from. And I would try to kind of convey that and communicate that in a softer way, that she could actually receive the information, she could see it from a different perspective. And then I would also convey, because she would get really emotional and overreact, and justifiably so now that I understand that, but I didn't understand it at the time. All I knew was my mom would be upset, and she'd be crying, and she'd be, you know, unreasonably emotional. And so then I would get her to calm down, and then I would explain back to him what she was really trying to say. And so, and I would do that, and I would adjust the communication in a way that he was actually able to receive it without being threatened, without being angry. And these are things that were just a normal Saturday, right? A normal Tuesday, whatever it was. Um, of growing up in the household that I grew up in. So that while there's a lot of trauma and there's a lot of things that I had to unpack, um, when you do this healing inner work, what you can do is whatever ways that you learned how to cope, you can actually harness those and actually turn those into strengths, rather than seeing them as weaknesses, because now you understand the mechanics behind it, you understand the emotions behind it, and you know how to leverage it in a way that's actually effective for you and allows you to be stronger, and allows you to release that hold that the past might have on you. So, in the case of because there'd be times where sometimes I would react more like my mom in a situation if I was communicated with in a certain way, then I would overreact emotionally. And then other times I would act more like the abuser and I didn't care and I would be relentless and I would just like, no, you have to do it this way. I don't care what you're saying. And I would just be cold and emotionless. So, like, I had this switch between being overly emotional and being overly cold. And learning to find the balance between those two. It's much easier when you are the objective party and then you can see other two people and you can mitigate and you can negotiate and manage that kind of conflict, right? Um, but it's a lot harder when you're in it and now your emotions are triggered and nobody's taught you how to understand where those emotions are coming from, understand, oh, okay, I know what's going on with me right now. This is what's happening. I know how to deal with it. I have the tools, I have the strategy, and I know not to react to this situation. You know how to control those emotions and be able to function in a way that's actually productive instead of destructive, in being able to communicate so that everybody within the situation is comes out with a happy outcome, rather than feeling like one person was made to be right and one person was made to be wrong. And learning how to solve problems in this kind of way where it's an actual win-win and people's feelings are taken into account and consideration, um, do matter, right? And I know that that sounds like a participation trophy kind of bullshit, but it is not. When it comes to the majority of the things that you will deal with in your personal life and your professional life, you are going to have to focus more on the emotions rather than the mechanics of what is going on, because you can be right or you can be happy. And so that is the training for tonight. I'm going to actually wrap it up a little bit earlier than normal. Unless anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions if you have them. Um, for those of you, I know there's been a few people popping in and out. My name is Tina. I am a happiness coach, and I do help people deal with the emotions, whether that's depression, anxiety, conflict resolution, any of those kind of negative emotions, and be able to transition so that you're in a happier place. And I use my personal experience with my trauma background as well as my change management and how I've implemented this stuff in a business environment. And for those of you that are interested, I do have my YouTube channel where I upload these trainings. So if you missed part of it and you want to go back and watch the trainings, you can check out my YouTube channel, which is Coach Tina B 125. Make sure that you click on the subscribe button so that you get notified when I've uploaded a video. And I will be launching a coaching program, an 8-week program that'll help train you on the tools that you need so that you don't have to go through the suffering that I had to go through in being able to do this inner work. And we can work through this and do this quicker together so that you can create happier relationships with yourself, with those around you, in your personal life and your professional life. And so that'll be the goal. And that I'll be releasing the details on that on April 17th, which is actually my birthday. So that's what I will be doing. So guys, hope this was helpful. If you guys have any other questions, or if you have anything specific that you're dealing with that you would like some help with, let me know and I will be happy to create a training for that. So I will see you again tomorrow. Have a great night and we will talk to you later. Bye.